If there was one area in which the Kansas City Chiefs could really improve for 2025, it would be at the wide receiver spot. Rashee Rice had an incredible start to the 2024 season, but after that injury, the Chiefs were lacking some playmaking, but they found a guy in the 4th round of this year's draft who could maybe change everything for them. Right now, he is their most hyped up rookie, and many believe that Jalen Royals could be a star for Kansas City in the coming seasons. But who even is Jalen Royals? Well, he was a 0-star recruit who ended up having to go the JUCO route before becoming an All-American at Utah State. He ended up being limited a little bit in 2024 due to an injury, but he has gotten a ton of hype over the last few months, and in today's video, I'm going to introduce you to who Jalen Royals is, go through his unique and crazy story, and talk about his initial reaction with the Chiefs. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Jalen Royals. Going back in time, their family was comprised of Jaylen and his older sister, and they would spend most of their summers traveling for athletics for both Jaylen and his sister. He was seen as an incredible athlete, and not surprisingly, it would transfer to more than just football. One of his favorite activities was also basketball, as he said, quote, "I used to play basketball when I was growing up, all throughout high school, middle school, and elementary school. I stopped playing when I got to college, of course." He ended up growing up in the state of Georgia, where football is king, as he got to go to high school in Powder Springs, Georgia. He ended up going to Hillgrove High School, and Royals was not highly recruited coming out of high school for several reasons. With everything going on in the world in 2020, this would limit his ability to play at recruiting camps and get recruited that way. He also loved basketball maybe a little bit too much, as his dad said, quote, "I think that's what hurt his recruiting career, because when it was time to focus on football or make a decision which way he wanted to go, he still had basketball as an option." He ended up being decently good at it though, as he was one of the higher ranked point guards in the state of Georgia and spent a ton of time going across the country playing in AAU basketball tournaments. For his prep career at Hillgrove High School though, he ended up having 26 catches for 455 yards and 4 touchdowns as a senior. He ended up being listed at 6 foot and 205 pounds, and his athleticism always showed on the track team, as he was an all-state high jumper and would also place number 6 in the state championship. He ranked second on the team in all 3 of those categories, plus contributed with 3 interceptions, including a pick 6 and 6 pass deflections in just 10 games. He did say he received some FBS interest, as apparently he made visits to both Auburn and LSU, but was never offered any Division I scholarships. He was offered by some smaller 4-year programs, plus some JUCOs, and when asked why he felt he was under-recruited, he said, quote, "Probably my grades. Coming out of high school, they weren't all that good, so I had to go to the JUCO." According to 24/7 Sports, Royals was a 0-star recruit and headed to the JUCO system. So, how would he end up doing there? Well, he'd play his freshman year in 2021 and had 7 catches for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns in just 11 games. He ended up having a truly crazy story on how he got to Utah State, as in 16 months, he went from a guy not on their radar to a star there. At the time, he made a 1,600-mile journey from Georgia to attend a camp in Logan, Utah. The Aggies were also not actively recruiting Royals at the time. Their offensive coordinator, Kyle Stefano, said, quote, "I hadn't heard of him, and I didn't know who he was. He walked up to me before the camp and introduced himself. He had his card that he filled out for him, and it said Georgia Military, and I was like, 'You came all the way from Georgia?' And he said, 'Yes, sir.' I think we sent out a bunch of random camp invites to a bunch of different schools, and you never know who's going to show up. Very rarely does someone show up that you're not expecting, and sure enough, he just kind of appeared." I guess it wasn't totally happenstance, as Dave Robertson, Utah State's former director of player personnel, had reached out to Georgia Military College about attending the camp. Royals would end up flying to Salt Lake City with his father, stayed at a family friend's house, and then the duo then drove to Logan. Royals said, quote, "He had texted me and I didn't know who it was at first, and he was saying, 'Come to the Utah State camp, we like your film.' And him and Coach Robertson told me to come, so I spoke to my dad about this, and I wanted to do this and go all the way out there." For starters, he also had blazing speed to pair along his tape, as he ended up running a 4.32 and then a 4.3 in his 40-yard dash time. He also went over 10 feet and 10 inches in the broad jump, which was only 2 inches shy of former Utah State receiver star Devin Tompkins when he was at the pro day. Royals was very confident he would catch the coaching staff's attention, but was admittedly surprised when he got an offer a couple of days later. He decided to accept it and moved to Logan shortly thereafter, and got really good grades while he was at Georgia Military College, which was impressive. What's really insane to me is he was able to turn a 2-hour camp invite into a FBS scholarship. That's pretty dang good for him. He also said he loved the family culture at Utah State, and it was a top reason he decided to transfer there after his freshman season. So how would he end up doing at Utah State though? So Jaylen would play his first season for Utah State back in 2022, and nothing would come of it. He would appear in 11 total matchups, but apparently did not register a single stat line. Going into 2023, nobody thought this guy was going to be anything. I mean, no offense, he hadn't caught in a single pass, and maybe the staff had made a mistake bringing him in. Well, instead he became one of the most random stars in college football in 2023, as in their first game against Iowa, he had 5 catches for 39 yards. He then proceeded to have touchdowns against both Idaho State and Air Force, and then followed it up with 7 catches against James Madison. He'd then finish out the month of September with his best game of his career, finishing with 7 catches for 185 yards and 3 touchdowns against UConn. He then had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against Colorado State, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against Fresno State, and then later on in the season went for over 100 yards against Boise. To finish off the regular season, he'd have 2 touchdowns against New Mexico, and all of a sudden, Royals was one of the best kept receivers in the country. He'd finish out his 2023 season with a bowl game appearance against Georgia State, where he'd have a touchdown and a loss to them. In total, Royals had 71 catches for 1,080 yards and 15 total touchdowns. He became the 13th player to ever go for 1,000 yards in Utah State history, and he started all 13 games and had a program record 15 touchdowns. He also led the country with 7 touchdown receptions of 50 or more yards. Over the course of those 8 quarters against UConn, Colorado State, and Fresno State, he ended up having 7 touchdowns in that period of time, and 5 of them were over 50 yards. This was completely absurd. After the year was over, their offensive coordinator, Cooper Bassett, said that he had received multiple NIL offers during the last 6 months that on their own were worth more than what Bassett had made in his entire coaching career. He said, quote, I mean, I have not made in my lifetime as much money as Jaylen's been offered over the last 6 months. So going into 2024, he'd have a ridiculous amount of hype and would not end up transferring. He stayed at Utah State, and it would kind of bite him, but it kind of wouldn't. Royals would be limited to 7 games due to an injury, but in the 7 games he played, he was honestly absurd. He had 5 catches and a touchdown in their first game against Robert Morris, and then against the USC Trojans, he caught 6 passes. He also had 4 catches against Utah. But his last 4 games were also insane. On the road against Temple, he had 10 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown, had 211 yards and 2 touchdowns against Boise State, 10 catches for 155 yards against UNLV, and 11 catches for 188 yards against New Mexico. He was also putting up touchdowns, as in total in just 7 games, he caught 55 passes for 834 yards and 6 scores. Jalen Royals was a star, but as I said, he ended up getting injured unfortunately. In total, he has appeared in 32 games with the Utah State Aggies and made 21 starts. He had over 126 catches for 1,900 yards and 21 touchdowns, and was 3rd in program history for touchdown catches, 12th in receiving yards, and 5th all-time in 100-yard receiving games. He ended up saying, quote, "It has been a lifelong dream to play in the NFL. Starting from youth ball to where I am now has been a blessing. I would first like to thank God for all he's done for me, and nothing would be possible without him." Royals has done this in every imaginable way, catching deep balls, turning screen passes into scores, and beating defensive backs with hotly contested one-on-one grabs. He'll be the first Aggie taken in the draft since Jordan Love went in the first round back in 2020, and Jalen Royals' story is truly insane. I know at one point Mel Kiper listed Royals as a potential option to go at the 23rd overall pick, but in general, Jalen Royals probably won't hear his name on the first night if we're being honest here. According to NFL Mock Database, he's a projected 3rd round pick, the 77th overall player, and a guy who's supposed to go day 2. So yeah, eventually Royals was selected in the 4th round of the 2025 NFL Draft with pick number 133 by the Kansas City Chiefs. Despite his lack of experience in college and not going against the most prestigious competition, the Chiefs felt he was very much worthy of a pick. He was the first Utah State player drafted into the NFL since Jordan Love went in the 1st round all the way back in 2020. One of the things that the Chiefs really liked about Royals was his playmaking ability, as he had 21 touchdowns and 15.2 yards per catch during his 2 seasons at Utah State. He may be a little bit undersized and may not be the best in terms of his deep ball, but they like his ability to make plays after the catch, and they overall think he checks a ton of boxes. A lot of people already think he's a lot like Rashee Rice. As their director of player personnel said, quote, "His game is very similar to Rashee's. He's got big hands and strong hands, and he's very good after the catch." Yeah, we all know the Chiefs failed to get a ton of big passing plays last season, and part of that was definitely due to losing Rice early on with that knee injury, but they're expecting him back, and they also have Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, and Juju Smith-Schuster. But despite coming into a pretty log-jammed receiver room, Greg Castillo, a Chiefs scout, said, quote, "He can make an impact immediately. The run after a catch ability stands out, and that was seen in his 3 years at Utah State." So yeah, the Chiefs got a guy in the 4th round who I think has an opportunity to be really good for them. Will he put up all-pro numbers his rookie year? Probably not, but could he become a good 3rd option? I think so. Also, you never know how things work in the NFL, as Rice could hurt his knee again, Hollywood Brown could end up getting hurt, and then all of a sudden he's forced to do a lot early on. Either way, I think he checks a lot of boxes for them, and they got a really good player in the 4th round, and his story is also extremely unique. This guy's chances of making it to the NFL were at one point almost 0%, but right now he found his way into the NFL's most popular team, and we'll see if he can become a big-time weapon for Patrick Mahomes. But what do you guys think? If you're a Utah State or a Kansas City fan, what do you think of Jalen Royals? How do you think he's going to do this season? And what other rookie should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out some of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.